Welcome to DS Trucks. In this video, I want to talk about whether or not you should use MOTORCRAFT fluids and filters only on your Ford. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I'm doing an oil change on my wife's 2019 F-150 with the 2.7 EcoBoost. And when I went and picked up the oil, this topic came up at the local AutoZone, because when I went in there, I picked up a MOTORCRAFT filter against their wishes, but I also picked up some Pennzoil Platinum full synthetic oil for my wife's 2.7 EcoBoost. And number one, they wanted to offer me a cheap filter with some kind of a deal, some kind of a package deal, and I really didn't want to go that route. I wanted to at least stick with the MOTORCRAFT filter. And I don't know, that's one of those things where you're using their filter cartridge. It goes in here. Ford's got all kinds of patents on their filters, and maybe it's just a theory, but for me, for these kind of filters, I like to stick with OEM. If you look real close at the cap, there's a patent number right there on the cap. If you can see it, I don't know where it's at, but looking at the old filter over here, there's a patent number even located on the filter. So does that mean that aftermarket filters made by other companies don't fit? Not necessarily. If you're going with a reputable company, maybe you want to run AMSOIL, their real nice synthetic filter, it probably does fit. But I don't know. I'm not going to run a cheap filter. I'm going to run at least MOTORCRAFT filters in this situation. Now, if it were a spin-on filter, I wouldn't have any problem using a different spin-on filter that's a higher quality, because MOTORCRAFT doesn't own spin-on filters or anything. They just have some weird patents sometimes when it comes to their cartridge style filters. But after going through that whole thing with the people at AutoZone, I think the manager come up and he said, "You're not going to run MOTORCRAFT oil?" And he's got a point. MOTORCRAFT does make good oil. There's nothing wrong with MOTORCRAFT oil, but for me, I kind of look at it as Ford doesn't make oil necessarily. They contract it out to another company. There's a middleman involved. Ford's got to make money. That other company's got to make money. And it's just rebranded oil from some other company, which I don't know what company that is or what have you. But they have good oil. If you read the spec sheet, they're pretty transparent about the specifications of their oil. The flash point is pretty good. The cold pour is pretty good. The TBN is pretty good. But it's not the best oil. It's just good oil. The Pennzoil full synthetic, guys, I watch a little bit of Project Farms, and Pennzoil's got some good oil. Now, that being said, now doing some closer inspection, this is not the top tier Pennzoil Platinum oil, because that, of course, is not available at AutoZone. This is just your Pennzoil full synthetic Platinum, but I really wanted to get their full synthetic Platinum Ultra Extreme Performance because, like I say, I watch a little bit of Project Farms, and I believe that is the oil that almost won the championship right behind AMSOIL on that channel, Project Farms. So I like to run this oil. Why? Because my wife doesn't get very many oil changes. I think this is her third oil change, and I think she's at like 5,000 miles. So her oil gets used for like starting up, warming up, and she just doesn't have a long drive to work. So it just doesn't get a lot of oil changes, guys. So this oil, the point is, this oil, why use full synthetic on a vehicle like this? Because the oil ends up spending a long time in the engine. It can spend a year. It usually spends like a year inside the engine. So I want an oil that can handle hanging out in your motor for a year, even though it doesn't get a lot of miles. Typically, these full synthetics have a better rating that can last a little longer. But should you use MOTORCRAFT only? There's nothing wrong with it, and it's a safe bet because it's the right viscosity and everything. But the idea that it's the only choice, not really true. When the manager came up and he said, "You're not running MOTORCRAFT oil, you're going to run Pennzoil. MOTORCRAFT is the best for a Ford as far as oil is concerned." It's a Ford is a Ford. but an engine is an engine at the end of the day. I think the best oil is just the best oil. It doesn't necessarily have to be MOTORCRAFT oil as the best oil. Ford didn't necessarily engineer an oil for these engines, for these mass-produced engines. The oil is just their shelf oil that they've been running since they've had even the 5.4 or whatever, however long they've had their synthetic blend or their full synthetic MOTORCRAFT oil out. It's just a good enough oil. It's not the only oil for the Ford. So as long as it's the right viscosity and it's the right now here's one catch-22 to the whole deal. Ford's MOTORCRAFT oil, I wouldn't be surprised if their MOTORCRAFT synthetic blend oil is closer to a full synthetic than a different company's blend. So my personal opinion would be to, if you're gonna do minimum maintenance, go with MOTORCRAFT. If you're gonna run synthetic blend, if you're gonna run the synthetic blend, go with the MOTORCRAFT synthetic blend, because if you go with a different company's synthetic blend, it might not be up to the task of MOTORCRAFT synthetic blend. Because if you read the spec sheet of MOTORCRAFT synthetic blend, it's a pretty good oil. Again, pretty good pour point, pretty good flash point. And then if you look at their spec sheet on their full synthetic MOTORCRAFT oil, it's pretty close to what their blend is. It just has a little bit better cold pour point and a little bit better flash point. So if you're going to use minimum maintenance or minimum blends, I would recommend going with the Ford MOTORCRAFT synthetic blend, because you never know really how good another blend is going to be compared to a MOTORCRAFT blend. Now, if you're going with the best full synthetics that you can get, well, there's nothing wrong with going with your Mobil 1. There's nothing wrong with going with your Pennzoil. There's nothing wrong with going with your AMSOIL, because you're going with a higher level oil, or at least a really, really good oil. So that's just my little 2 cents. But when it comes to filters, I like the MOTORCRAFT filters. Now, I've got a 6.7 liter Power Stroke turbo diesel. I'll show you guys that also. And for that truck, that's going to see MOTORCRAFT fuel filters, at least for sure. But the oil filter on that truck, there's nothing wrong with going with a better rated oil filter, because it's a spin-on oil filter. That technology was invented, like 50, 60 years ago by, I don't know who, some guy made that. It's not something that another company can't replicate. The spin-on oil filter can be replicated, and you can get a better quality filter. Like AMSOIL, they've got a full synthetic oil filter that's a really high quality filter. Same with like Royal Purple and some other companies. They make really good filters, and there's nothing wrong with using just a really good, reputable filter. Now, if you're going to cheap out, I think if you're looking to save money, MOTORCRAFT is the way to go, because they have a filter that is good. It has a synthetic drain back valve. It has good, it has everything you need, and it's good enough. So if you're going to save money, go with the MOTORCRAFT. Don't go with some cheap knockoff filter. Like, that's not the thing to do with one of these vehicles. But, you know, MOTORCRAFT, I'm interested in trying out some new stuff, some top of the line stuff, but at the end of the day, all the vehicle really needs is MOTORCRAFT, and it's the most cost effective and is adequate for the vehicle. So from a purely financial standpoint, MOTORCRAFT is the way to go, because they offer you the lowest price for the best filter. And arguably, if you want to say MOTORCRAFT is the best, bang for the buck wise, it is the best, because anything less than MOTORCRAFT it's probably not adequate. You know, if anything less than MOTORCRAFT is probably not adequate. Now, when it comes to the fuel filters, there's a filter underneath the truck and there's a filter underneath the hood. That's all going to stay MOTORCRAFT. But the oil filter, that might sway a little bit. I'm not sure yet. I really just like what AMSOIL has to offer as far as oil filters. They're just real good oil filters with synthetic media, and they filter down to a much lower micron than what MOTORCRAFT does, and it also has a really good efficiency rating. So I don't know, you know, for a spin-on oil filter, I think AMSOIL can make a good spin-on oil filter. But some of these other companies like Bosch or whatever might have a decent enough oil filter that's spin-on. But for these ones that go in a cartridge, I'll probably stick with MOTORCRAFT. I know AMSOIL does make one of these filters. I'd have to look at it. But I've heard that some of these aftermarket filters for this style of filter, they don't have the right dimensions sometimes. This is just what I've heard. Sometimes that the aftermarket filter, because of patents or whatever, will be shorter or taller or whatever, and won't be the right fit and will allow unfiltered oil to go through the engine. How true that is, I don't know. But I don't know. I guess worst case, if you want to go with some high-end filters like AMSOIL synthetic filters, at least compare the size of everything. Make sure one's not short or whatever before you put it in. So anyway, guys, do you have to use all MOTORCRAFT? In some cases, you probably should. But as far as oil, I think it's good to deviate a little bit from MOTORCRAFT if you're going with the high performance oil. For example, with the diesels, I know a lot of guys are running the Shell Rotella T6 and having a lot of success with it. Whereas the MOTORCRAFT diesel oil, their 5W40 full synthetic or their 10W30 might not be as good as that Shell Rotella T6. But anyway, guys, that's it for the video. This is DS Trucks. My name is Sean. Thank you for watching. We run nothing but the best here. Over and out. See you in the next video.